Welcome to Sovereign Alpha, your edge in the crypto markets. If you want real-time crypto intelligence, smart analysis, and alpha before the crowd, make sure you subscribe now and turn on notifications, because in crypto, timing is everything. And right now, Bitcoin and crypto is bouncing in the short term because we just saw CPI inflation numbers come in below expectations, which is good news for the US stock market, now bouncing in the short term, which is now, of course, good news for Bitcoin and crypto in the short term, playing out a slight bounce. And on top of that, we're now playing out a new, shorter-term bullish signal that we need to pay attention to, which I'll talk about in just a moment, for Bitcoin alongside Ethereum, which is continuing to hold above this crucial level of support, potentially coming in for a retest of this area of resistance, while the price of XRP is still playing out this shorter-term oversold signal. So I'll be talking about all of that and so much more later in the video. So definitely watch to the end. First of all, just before taking a look at the Bitcoin and crypto charts today, and before even taking a quick look at the US stock market, we need to talk about some news today, because a matter of hours ago, of course, we saw new CPI inflation numbers get released. And typically, we see maybe some short-term volatility around these inflation numbers, especially if they come in basically outside of expectations. And this time around, the expected result was 2.5% year-over-year inflation, whereas the actual number came in at 2.4% year-over-year inflation. So basically, we saw inflation numbers come in slightly below expectations, which is typically a bullish catalyst for markets. And really, the basic reason behind lower inflation, meaning bullish for markets, is because that essentially means interest rates can potentially go lower than what was expected potentially in the future. And if we have lower interest rates, that's also fundamentally bullish for markets, because the lower the interest rates are, the cheaper it is to borrow money, which can add more liquidity and effectively print money and pump that into asset prices, and obviously pump the stock market, pump the crypto market, etc., if we have lower interest rates. And this is a sign that we could potentially see lower interest rates. And so that is some financial news today that's just happened that is potentially helping to cause this slight little bounce that we're currently seeing in the US stock market. This is the S&P 500 index on the 1-hour time frame. And we can see that so far today, yes indeed, after we saw these inflation numbers come in below expectations, we did indeed see, at least so far, a short-term bounce here in the US stock market. Obviously, starting to recover a little bit after that previous dump and rejection from resistance. And what's very interesting is that we actually bounced very close to these previous lows, which means the price here in the US stock market, the S&P 500 index, is still basically in a bit of a sideways price range. Basically just bouncing between relatively horizontal support and horizontal resistance. And so this is a great indication for the crypto market to tell us what is likely going to happen here in the short term. Obviously, a slight little bounce in the imminent short term, but overall in a bit of a sideways price range if we're talking about a period of maybe 1 or 2 weeks. It's still quite likely for crypto, so keep that in mind. And if we're taking a look at the Bitcoin charts today, here on the weekly time frame, not much has changed over the last 1 day on the weekly chart. So this super trend indicator is still sitting in the red. And of course, we still have this massive bearish divergence still currently active on the weekly time frame. But once again, we are now entering into oversold, which I've explained in more detail in recent videos here on the channel, but I won't repeat too much in this video. So without wasting your time, getting straight into the 3-day Bitcoin price chart. And right now, it is quite clear that the price of Bitcoin is basically just bouncing between support and resistance here in the shorter term. And obviously, this is exactly what I've been talking about ever since we saw that flash crash. And of course, the bounce from 60,000. I said it's now quite likely that's going to be at least a local low. Not necessarily the bottom, but at least some sort of low put in place in the price that will likely last for maybe a couple of weeks, kind of like what we saw during December. We hit a local low here. We held above that low, and that was the low for close to a month, actually, in this case. Actually, over a month. From around November, all the way up until around early to mid-January. And then we saw that next bearish move. So remember, I'm not saying this is the bottom. It is still possible we can ultimately go lower at some stage later on. But in the shorter term, talking about maybe the next 1 or 2 weeks, it's still quite likely we either play out some choppy sideways price action or maybe just a slight little bullish relief, kind of like what we saw in December 2025, is a very likely scenario, is still my prediction moving forward, and is continuing to perfectly play out as expected. And so, obviously, continue to expect a lot of support at 60,000, and also down here. If we ultimately get down here, in between 53,000 to 56,000, I would expect a lot of support in that area. And as for resistance, expect a lot of resistance in between around 72,000 to 76,000. But also keep in mind, we're playing out this oversold signal on the 3-day time frame, which is one of the strong indications as to why I've been saying expect just a bit of a relief, a bit of a break from all of the bearish price action, at least in the shorter term, maybe for a couple of weeks, just to help to reset the RSI out of oversold. And if we're zooming further into the short term, taking a look at the 2-hour Bitcoin price chart, obviously, right now, as usual, the Bitcoin price is following the U.S. stock market. Once again, these markets are highly correlated to each other. So if stocks experience a bounce, expect some sort of little bounce or relief for Bitcoin and cryptos, a very likely scenario. But on top of that, we're also now actively playing out just a short-term bullish divergence here on the 2-hour time frame. We've already confirmed lower lows in place in the price in the candle closes. And we've already now confirmed some very slight higher lows. But still, higher lows confirmed in place in the 2-hour Bitcoin RSI, which, once again, is the price and the RSI diverging in the bullish direction. And typically, from a bullish divergence, we usually see either a slight bullish relief or maybe just some choppy sideways price action. So basically, we're running out of that bearish momentum, and we're going to have a bit of a break now, a bit of a relief from all of the bearish price action here in the shorter term. But remember, this is talking about short-term moves up and down, obviously. But overall, we're still in a bit of a sideways price range between this support and this resistance, if we're zooming out a little bit. But then, if we zoom out further, remember, on the much larger time frames, we're still not in the clear yet, if we're talking about multiple months. So, understand the difference between the different time frames. Obviously, my predictions on the larger time frames have not changed in quite a while, in many months. My prediction, obviously, on the 3-day time frame has not changed for around a week, since after we saw that flash crash. My prediction has been some sideways price action, just in this range right here, is a very likely scenario. And then, of course, my short-term prediction right now for the price is just a slight bullish relief as a very likely scenario, playing out this short-term bullish divergence, potentially soon about to retest this key level of resistance, sitting at just under or close to 72,000. Once again, is where this strong resistance starts. But this level in particular, on the 2-hour time frame, is sitting at around 71.6K, 6K, acting as strong resistance. And so those are my exact predictions and key levels to watch out for. And if we're taking a quick look at the Bitcoin liquidation heat map, obviously over the last few days we've been wiping out a lot of downside liquidity, and we still have a little bit of downside liquidity to watch out for at give or take 65,000, around 65 to 65.1K. So keep that in mind. That's still a level that we could potentially hit, maybe in a few days, after we first play out this slight little relief and a retest of resistance. But now that we're playing out this, obviously it's worth watching out for any liquidity that's building towards the upside. And as of recording this video, a matter of hours ago, we just recently wiped out a small amount of liquidity that was sitting at just above 1.5 thousand. And now we have a small amount building at pretty much exactly 70,000, and also a decent amount of liquidity building at around 72.3K, which means it's possible we could actually see another little liquidity grab to wipe out that liquidity, maybe just above 72,000, kind of like what we saw just here. We had liquidity building just above resistance, saw a little spike towards the upside to grab that liquidity, but then we never confirmed the breakout because we never confirmed candle closes above that level or held above that level, which means that remained as resistance. And so, overall, it is actually quite likely we could see something similar to what we saw back here. Another retest of resistance, and then potentially a little liquidity grab. But then once again, we need to actually confirm candle closes and hold above 72,000 in order to actually confirm a breakout here, which right now we have not seen. So overall, those are my expectations and the key levels to watch out for in the shorter term. And obviously, if you want to trade any of these moves in the price of Bitcoin or any crypto, you need to be set up ready to go on a crypto exchange. And if you use the first link below this video in the description and in the pinned comment, that first link below this video will take you to this page right here over on the BTEX crypto exchange, which, by the way, is an exchange that I personally use myself and is a no KYC exchange. And if you use that first link below the video to actually make your account, as you can see on this page, there's currently an exclusive prize pool of up to 50,000 USDT. In other words, simply just by trading crypto using that link below the video to BitX, the first link below the video, you can take advantage of major prizes here that are only available using that link. As you can see right here, an exclusive prize pool. And so, obviously, if you're going to be trading crypto anyway, you might as well check this out and take advantage of this. Once again, first link below the video. And remember, BTNX is also a no KYC exchange. But if you want another exchange out there, another option that I personally use myself, which is also a no KYC exchange, then in that situation, check out the second link below the video in the description and in the pinned comment, because the second link below this video will take you to this page right here over on the 2-Bit Crypto Exchange, which, once again, is also a no KYC exchange, and they just recently partnered with La Liga. So, to celebrate this partnership, there's a 800,000 USD prize pool here that you can take advantage of just by simply trading crypto using that second link below the video to 2-Bit. So, once again, if you're going to be trading crypto anyway, you might as well check this out and take advantage of this using that second link below the video. And remember, 2-Bit is also a no KYC exchange. But with that being said, taking a quick look at the Bitcoin dominance chart on the daily time frame, and obviously, we could see short-term bullish and short-term bearish moves. But for the most part, the Bitcoin dominance is still basically just chopping around sideways, relatively neutral in terms of the trend or momentum that we're currently seeing. And so basically, just continue to expect very similar price action for a lot of the major old coins out there, on average, compared to what Bitcoin is doing. Which means, of course, if Bitcoin right now is playing out this slight little relief, potentially soon about to retest some key resistance, expect something similar to this in the short term for a lot of the major altcoins, is basically what this is telling us right now here in the Bitcoin dominance. And if we're taking a look at Ethereum on the 3-day time frame right now, the price of ETH is also potentially on its way towards retesting some key resistance to pay attention to, and obviously still playing out this oversold signal here in the 3-day Ethereum RSI. And so, once again, an oversold signal does not necessarily guarantee we've hit the bottom. As we saw back here around middle of March 2025, we hit oversold in the 3-day Ethereum RSI. And yes, we did see a local low and a decent little bounce over the next 1 to 2 weeks, give or take. But overall, that did not confirm the bottom. We ultimately went lower later on. So keep that in mind. We have not yet confirmed a reversal or an end of this larger bearish trend. But just in the shorter term, if we're talking about a period of days or possibly weeks, yes, it is quite likely we'll continue a little bit more of a relief here. Either some choppy sideways price action or just a slight bullish relief to reset the RSI out of oversold, which can technically give us more room towards the downside later on. So keep that in mind. And if we're zooming into the daily Ethereum price chart, obviously we're continuing to hold above this crucial level of support here at around 1.8K. So continue to expect a lot of support around there. And as for resistance, obviously, like I just said a moment ago, we're potentially now about to retest this important area of resistance here, sitting in between around 2150 to 2250. So really around 2150 is where this resistance starts. And that's pretty much exactly where we saw that perfect rejection from around half a week ago. And so once again, because Ethereum and a lot of these old coins will likely perform very similar to what Bitcoin is doing, and because Bitcoin is playing out a short-term bullish divergence, it is quite likely that Ethereum and other old coins will likely now about to retest these key points of resistance. But obviously, once we start hitting these points of resistance, expect the price to begin to struggle, possibly even see more rejections from around these areas. And if we're taking a look at the price of XRP on the weekly time frame, obviously we technically still have a massive bearish divergence to watch out for, which is still active on the weekly XRP price chart. So, if we're talking about the longer-term trend, we're still not in the clear yet, still not looking good. But in terms of the shorter-term price action, at least for now, we're still holding above this crucial area of support here, sitting in between around 130 to 140. In fact, over the last 1 or 2 days or so, we've now seen yet another perfect bounce from this exact area of support on the prior chart, which, by the way, is an area on the price chart I've been talking about since much, much higher prices. Since, basically, the price was well above $2 at much higher prices, I've been talking about $130 to $140 is a key area to watch out for, when pretty much no one else out there believed that those sort of prices were possible. But with that being said, if we're taking a look at the 3-day time frame, as I've already been saying over the last half a week to 1 week, we hit oversold in the 3-day XRP RSI, which is a signal telling us that we're likely at least some sort of local low, not necessarily the bottom. Like I've explained many times, it is possible we can ultimately go lower at some stage later on. Maybe in a few weeks or a month from now, for example. But at least over the next few days, most likely the next 1 to 2 weeks, it is quite likely we're going to continue to reset this RSI a little further towards the upside out of oversold, which means either some choppy sideways price action or just a slight bullish relief. Remember, this is not necessarily a reversal signal or a bottom signal, but it is a signal telling us to expect some sort of break from all of the bearish price action just for the next maybe 1 or 2 weeks. And so obviously that's also still perfectly playing out as predicted here in the shorter term. And if we're taking a look at the price of Solana on the weekly time frame, just over the last 1 to 2 days, we've now seen yet another perfect bounce from my exact area of support. Still sitting in between $75 to $80. So obviously we still have a lot of support around there. And for now, it is good news that the price is holding that area. Because like I explained in my last video, obviously in the thumbnail, I talked about a 30% dump. And that was particularly talking about Solana here, because like I explained in my last video in more detail, I said if we break below $75 with confirmations, so for example, a weekly candle closed below 75, and especially if we fail to get back above that area, I said if that confirms, which is not yet confirmed, but if it confirms, then expect most likely more than a 30% dump towards the downside. Because if we're measuring from roughly 75 towards the next significant support at give or take $50, that's just over a 30% move down. And that's with no leverage. But obviously right now, once again, that's not currently confirmed. And we're still holding $75 to $80 as a crucial area of support, which at least in the short term, once again, is good news for the price of Solana. And remember, in terms of short-term price action, really just pay attention to what Bitcoin is doing to figure out what is very likely going to happen for a lot of these altcoins. Which means with Bitcoin playing out this bullish divergence, potentially soon about to retest this point of resistance, it's quite likely we'll see something similar in the shorter term for a lot of these altcoins like Solana. And as for the next significant area of resistance to watch out for, that's really sitting in between roughly $95 to $105. So keep that area in mind. And if we're taking a look at the price of Chainlink on the 3-day time frame, it's a somewhat similar situation for Chainlink. Obviously, the longer-term multi-month trend is technically still bearish. We've not yet confirmed any bottom signal or any reversal signal, but obviously in the shorter term, yes, we are playing out this oversold signal in the 3-day Chainlink RSI, which is a shorter-term signal telling us to expect either some choppy sideways price action or a slight bullish relief. Not necessarily confirming the end of the larger bearish trend, but just a bit of a break during the trend is still quite likely. As for support and resistance to watch out for, obviously we're still holding this crucial area of support here in between roughly $7.90 to $8.50. And as for resistance, we have a lot of resistance that we'll likely find in between around $9.50 to $10, based on previous significant support flipping into new resistance. And once again, because we're playing out this oversold signal, alongside the fact that a lot of these old coins like Chainlink will likely follow very similar price action to what Bitcoin is doing, it is quite likely we'll continue either just a slight little bounce towards this resistance, or maybe a little bit of choppy sideways price action here and there as well. Just ultimately playing out this oversold signal. A bit of a break from the bearish trend, but not necessarily confirming a reversal out of this larger bearish trend is still the situation, and still perfectly playing out as predicted.